I want to share a powerful goosebump inducing sequence of events that made me believe without a doubt that spirit can communicate to us in patterns and bringing thoughts or ideas repeatedly into our field of experience. It's about how I almost gave up the good space and how spirit had other plans for me. My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Welcome to the second episode of a two-part series based on Wayne Dyer's 4 messages of alignment from his book, Inspiration, Your Ultimate Calling. If you haven't checked out the first part, make sure you check it out. And this was a book that I picked up a few weeks ago, or maybe not even that, maybe like a month ago, but anyways, recently. And it really rocked my world in so many ways. And this one portion I thought would be so useful to share the 4 ways that spirit can beckon us to align with it again. As simple as some of this will sound, this knowledge really packs a spiritual punch in your day-to-day life. Because when you take the time to learn the way spirit speaks to us, it's much easier to notice, align, and feel peace. Because if you don't know what to look for, how do you know what to look for? I hope this illuminates how you're already receiving guidance and communication in your life. Because yes, spirit is already communicating and trying to send messages and speak to you. Not every method of alignment will apply to everyone, but the ones that do can be reaffirming and validating. So here we go. The third message of alignment that spirit uses is alignment with events. This is a fun one. It's when seemingly inexplicable events or occurrences happen and maybe spirit lining up coincidences, air quotes there, and Dr. Wayne Dyer puts them in parentheses to teach us or show us the way. Because, some people believe in coincidences, but if you know how spirit works, I feel like there are no coincidences, but that's everyone's journey to figure out, right? So Dr. Wayne Dyer says the language of spirit will proclaim its creativity by producing sequences of repetition to align us with our source. So the key is that spirit reproduces sequences of repetition to align us with our source. For example, a friend might mention a book, then you hear about it on a podcast, and then you see it at the bookstore, all in the same day or same week. When you have these repetitious moments, it's the spirit trying to get your attention and back into alignment. I want to share a powerful goosebump inducing sequence of events that made me believe without a doubt that spirit can communicate to us in patterns and bringing thoughts or ideas repeatedly into our field of experience. It's about how I almost gave up the good space and how spirit had other plans for me. I originally started the Good Space back in 2016 or 2017 with another writer and blogger. And if you've been around that long, you probably know that beginning. But in case you don't, that's how it started. We wanted to share spiritual thoughts and concepts and felt called to work together. So we sent out blog posts every week as emails. And then fast forward to 2019, and I felt called to expand what we were doing with the Good Space. This writer, now turned friend at this point, we did this business exercise because if we wanted to expand, let's make sure that what each of us envisioned for that expansion aligned. And after we did the exercise, we realized we were not 100% aligned. And even then, I wanted to make things work. Shortly after, so this was like fall or like winter-ish of 2019. So shortly after, in February 2020, I flew to a conference in Los Angeles and came back to New York pumped about the future of the Good Space. And yet a few days later, when I got back, this friend called to say she no longer wanted to be a part of the Good Space. It felt like the wind got knocked out of me. I just was flashing all the effort and resources that I had spent building something together. It felt like a betrayal and what I imagined a divorce would feel like. I felt angry, insecure, frustrated, and deep down, I believed I couldn't make anything worth reading or buying on my own. I literally felt like, okay, I could never run this on my own. So, and to add to that, she said she wanted to divide our blog posts like they were children. So like we had built up this catalog of like information for our readers, and she wanted to take away the parts that she wrote the most and then leave me with what I wrote the most, which was like, oh my gosh, it was so painful. So it's like this section I wrote, this section you wrote, and then we had to remove it from the website. It was torture. But also, if it meant ripping off the Band-Aid sooner, then I was down to get it over with. So the one thing I wouldn't budge on, though, was giving her the name, the Good Space. And I know you're like, why are you telling all this story? I just want you to have context. And it is important that I didn't budge on giving the name, because I 100% came up with that and I wouldn't part ways with it. And I'm sure she felt the sting on that one for sure. But we agreed, we're fine, we parted ways. And this is like right before COVID, by the way. So at this point, the inklings had started and like people were wondering what would happen, but it wasn't as full blown as it was. And also we had been planning a podcast, the very one that you're listening. We had already like planned the first few episodes, the intro. So like everything was lined up to happen. And then I was just left being like, okay, what do I do with this? Right. And so the next few days after that, after we had separated everything, we moved on. This was like a week later. The next few days, I felt pulled to do a yoga nidra class, which is one that focused on breath and restorative poses versus vinyasas and like more physically intensive poses. I really needed healing and peace at that time. So as I walked to the studio from my apartment, I prayed to God about the paralyzing fear I felt. I asked to find clarity and to know if the pain of this situation meant I needed to let go of it all, because at that time, being stuck in the fear and the paralyzing like emotions, it's really, really hard to know what spirit wants you to do and what you want to do. You just feel like you're in a blob of emotion. At this point, I was angry, but then I said, you know what? If I need to let go of all the blog posts, if I need to let go of the name, if I need to just move on, start fresh or not start at all and move on with my life, and maybe there isn't something that I'm supposed to be building, I would do it. But if he wanted me to move forward with the Good Space, I needed confirmation, because right now I don't feel like I can do this. So fast forward to me unrolling my mat and settling into class. In the small, cool room, the teacher said she wanted to base the class's intention around a concept that she had just read about in a magazine, in a yoga magazine. So she opened its pages and read a quote that said, "You need to be able to surrender and to know that you're supported in order to be able to be really content." So far, so good, right? Then she shared and explained that the Sanskrit word sukha means ease, or literally a good space. It's the comfort or sweetness we feel even in the midst of confusion or turbulent times. Every time I read this, I get super emotional. Like I still feel the chills in my body reading this. So she read the Sanskrit word sukha, which means ease or literally a good space. My ears perked up. My spirit was locked in on every word. You better believe it. She then said the class was centered around this idea of creating a good space in our lives. She said the phrase one more time, after which I prayed, okay, I'm listening. If I'm meant to continue with the good space, I know the teacher will mention it one last time. That way I know it's you, and I know that I'm interpreting this repetition correctly. So the class begins and nothing. She doesn't say it again. And I wondered towards the end of the class if maybe I pushed too much, like maybe I just pushed my luck and I should have just taken the sign, not the sign, but I should have taken the repetitions when I got them. Or maybe I had my answer. Maybe that wasn't a confirmation. Maybe it was just to remind me that I did good and I could move on. But sure enough, one of the last things the teacher mentioned was creating a good space in our lives and carrying that sense of space forward with us. I later took pictures of the pages she read from because, hello, of course I'm going to document that moment. So needless to say, I decided to keep moving with the good space. I launched the podcast in what turned out to be the pandemic. And, fast forward, I don't know, like 3 years, almost 3 years later. And it's like evolved into this thing that it wouldn't have had I not felt that confirmation, had I not just kept going forward and just trusting. And granted, I still have a lot of ways to go with trust, but it's amazing what we can do when we recognize the way that spirit speaks to us and we recognize that we're being spoken to, and we need, trusting that voice is so key and it's worth it. And although this kind of like massive type of event doesn't happen every day, what does happen more frequently are the moments you hear about a book multiple times from multiple sources, or you'll hear a word over and over. And I try to be careful about not over projecting onto events. But when I feel the small, warm feeling of the spirit, I know it's a nudge or confirmation, because a lot of people can get lost in signs, and, signs can come from any kind of spirit. but it's like those little things that you check in on to make sure it is spirit. Synchronicities, repetitions, I feel like can be one and the same, can take many shapes and forms. So one of our community members messaged to me the other day that she had just spoken to her therapist the day before about the exact topic the Good Space Daily email talked about. Super cool. And then people see repetitive numbers like 1111 or 444 on their phones, odometers, waiting in line, and it goes on and on. These are all invitations to be receptive and pay attention. Once you get used to how spirit communicates through events lining up, it's really hard to dismiss it as coincidence or accidental. The cool thing is these synchronicities have always been there, and it may take some time to start noticing them, but they are there, my friend. Wayne Dyer says, and our noticing indicates a new level of readiness to listen to our ultimate calling, end quote. That is so powerful. Noticing these repetitions and noticing these synchronicities opens you to a new level of readiness to listen to your ultimate calling. Because if we're not willing to hear the little small moments that spirit is speaking to us, how can we understand something as big and magnificent as our ultimate calling? So if you sense that spirit speaks to you through events, practice noticing those repetitions. Write them on a note in your phone or in a notebook. They're really fun to look back on and remember. And when you do find these repetitions, ask yourself, what do you feel is being pointed out or confirmed to you? Okay, the fourth alignment, the last and not least way we're beckoned to align with spirit is when our thoughts become tied with another person's behavior. This one will be short and sweet. The odds are high you've experienced this kind of situation where you think of someone you haven't talked to in ages. Then that person calls you or texts you or reaches out in some way, or you run into them in the most random place. Dr. Wayne Dyer says, quote, when people line up with our thoughts and mysteriously connect their physical presence with our private inner meanderings, we should take note, end quote. When this kind of synchronicity happens, it's helpful to become alert and open to what the reason might be. Maybe you're meant to bless that person. Maybe they'll connect you to someone or give you an idea you've been waiting for. Maybe it's to show you the power of your energy and that you can call anything and anyone to you, or for spirit to remind you that it's there. Humans are social creatures. And I often think of a school of fish underwater and how they move as if they're one body, knowing the direction and movements to take before being conscious of it. They can sense the energy, and it's not like, oh, let me talk to the fish next to me so we can all move the same way. It's just it's an innate sense. As social creatures ourselves and part of this vast oneness that is the universe, it's not a stretch to imagine that our thoughts can literally impact someone not even in the same physical space as us. This isn't even going into the studies that have shown two brains syncing up by being in the same room together. It's called coherence, and it's very fascinating. Have you experienced something like this before? I'd really love to hear. You can find my email or links to our Instagram reels on these topics where you can leave a comment in the show notes. So with these 4 messages of alignment, it's akin to what Wayne Dyer says, that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When we stay in a state of readiness, teachings and teachers will manifest. I hope you enjoy seeking out spirit and grow your connection to it. Now it's time for an affirmation. I know spirit speaks to me always, and I'm open to hearing it through events and people around me. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode, or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.